Chapter 17, Snakes and Arrows, 2008, Road Trip.
In my head, shifting and drifting, mechanical music, adrenaline surge.
I know the song's about a car, but this stream of consciousness is about motorcycles and Rush. So if you don't like either, our trip starts 2008, June the 8th, at the Ann Arbor B&B. The fast ride from home down the 401 to Sarnia was a breeze. With my new highway bars, I'm really digging riding with my feet in the wind. The border crossing, barely 10 minutes and 3 questions, and I was on my way to the land of sketchy paving. The U.S. interstate system is patched together like a quilt, all plaids and stripes with the occasional divot. It was a toss-up between Flint and Ann Arbor, and I took the college town. I was dancing with storm clouds and humidity all day, and then came the slow fade to black. I pulled over just in time to put on my rain gear when it all let loose. I drove into that for 90 minutes until I reached Ann Arbor. Now my GPS listed a burnt toast inn and guided me to the door because it reminded me of Toast, my old kitty. There was no room at that inn that night, but they told me about another B&B. So off I went to a house filled with hot university students and their friends. Feeling every bit my age, I opted for 2 good rye and cokes with the kids, a hot shower, and bed with the Ice Road Truckers on Discovery Television. June 9, Sheraton, Chicago. Up early with a plan to take Highway 12 all the way to Chicago. Good choice, sweet road, and I was almost alone through the fields and small towns for almost 4 hours wearing just a t-shirt. It was too hot for a jacket. Through one town, I noticed a funny billboard advertising the words, "The greatest cheeseburger in the world." Now, that's a tall claim, and I stopped, and I'll be damned if they didn't prove that claim, and then some. Now, I followed around the bottom of the lake until I could see the Chicago skyline, which was pretty much obscured by rain. I thought about pulling over, but there was no pooled water, and my bike feels really stuck to the road. Now, the GPS again said it was only 10 miles to the gig, so I went for it. And all that rain stopped as I pulled into the parking lot where the buses were and was met by John Aerosmith, who handed me a nice tall rye and coke. The venue had a great crew room, and I grabbed a shower, checked email before hitting catering for dinner with John and Dan McMullen, the fire marshal from Chicago. Pasta the way you want it. We all felt we got a little hosed on the quantity. Got a great t-shirt from the Rosemont, Illinois Safety Office, and on with the show. No propane flames tonight, local rules. So I took pictures from the back of the arena of the flame projectors. Man, I remember when they were the shit. Now they're second choice to the flame balls. Highlights for me, Limelight, Red Barchetta, Spindrift in between the wheels. I helped pack up pyro, all 6 cases of it, and waited around with the crew until it was time to follow the runner from the venue right to the door of the Sheraton, and then pay $42 to park the bike and valet. Staying in one of the bus driver's room, thanks Joe Bush. June 10, took another road out of Chicago to Detroit. Not as exotic as previous days, but there was many sights and smells and sounds. The 2 storms I had ridden through had caused a lot of damage. 100-year-old trees were snapped like twigs on people's front yards. One building was flattened and it looked like a 2-dimensional exploded CAD view drawing. The Amish were doing their thing. I saw a mother and her sons turning up a field with powered tillers. I've counted 4 dead deer at the side of the road, and I'm glad I'm driving during the day. Fuck deer. 20 miles south of Detroit, I-75 doesn't exist anymore, and it's a long detour through the burbs until it delivers me to the loading dock. where I parked the bike right in front of the crew doors next to the buses. John's wife, Heather, hi Heather, was there with 3-year-old Ethan. Hi Ethan, 3-year-old Ethan. Time flies. The parents and 10 of the best students from the class that John taught, and I helped lecture one day at St. Clair College in Windsor. Chris Blair, CB, was there tonight as he lives on John and Heather Street in Kingsville and has worked for the band as a little green beam guy. You're gonna lose your mind in Detroit Rock City. Natural Science is a classic song and has some of the best video, so I took about 75 pictures of that song alone. I tried to get some of the candid crew shots, but they moved too fast. I spent most of the night in Videoland watching David and Bob do their magic. With about 8 camera inputs and stacks of content on Catalyst and Do-Re-Mi, they're pretty busy, and the camera operators are getting gold. It's also quieter back there. Witch Hunt is one of my favorite numbers, with bursts of flame like the townspeople coming to get you. Now personally, I'd add one big old burst of balls at the end on the downbeat, but I don't have this gig, do I? And on that note, I gave up having the bike signed on this ride today. My bike is signed by clients and I'm proud to have worked for, and I've not worked for Rush. Never. So Neil trips over and on his way to the venue, grabs a Sharpie that's in the bag and signs it. I'm down with that. Now after the loadout was half done, we extracted our rides from the hellish dock at Joe Louis Arena. What a shit show. And kudos to CB for his excellent truck ballet, and it was just around 2 hours to get them on their way to Montreal. Now I drove through 5 kilometers of nasty detours through some pretty sketchy Detroit neighborhoods to get to the bridge. And then 10 kilometers of shitty 401 in the middle of the night till I could get on the back roads to the Aerosmiths in Kingsville. I was tired and it took forever. But when I pulled up in the lane, Chris and Heather were sitting in the hot tub with cold beer. Hot tub, that's right, jump back, kiss myself. Hot tub. It's good to have friends. June 11 from home. A late start to the day. Ethan and the dogs woke me up, but it wasn't enough to get me off the couch. I took Highway 3 and more than a few detours down country roads, and I stopped at a Harley shop outside of Leamington and got a gel seat pad. I don't want to spend too much time talking about my ass, but this is the longest I've ridden so far, and I'm a little tender down there. Went through a lot of small country roads, and the bike's really not shiny anymore, so bring on the dirt. My other ride is a 2001 Yamaha WR426 Thumper, and it's hardly moved for 2 seasons, ever since I got into the street bike. I actually passed a cop in the middle of nowhere, and I got a finger wag, even though I was just cruising. Later, back on number 3, moving fast, I got the high beams from a trucker, and I cruised through that radar trap with a gun on me doing 80 on the nose. And that was it for speeding for the rest of the day. Down Hamilton Mountain, up the QEW, clear to my door. And I sat with my neighbors, who fed me in return for stories of the journey still underway. We're going to take a little break from the ride now and talk about Shelley Knott, my adopted big sis. Now on the way on this ride, I decided that I would donate a dime to the Canadian Cancer Society for every kilometer ridden in Shelley's honor. She would have been 46 last month, and I miss her. In the last decade, the most I've seen of my big sis has been with this band on the road. At least we still have the Rio video where she explained to the band that everything's pretty much gone pants on their biggest show ever. And the stories from the crew about how everybody pulled that gig out of the fire to fire together, I could listen to that forever. And the DVD is proof that they all stepped up. I also think of Richie and wish him good fortune. And I want Marilyn to have all the Shelley stuff back, even if I have to go get it myself. And they're both gone now. June 12, Montreal, my hometown. Another 8 a.m. start with a full coffee in the saddle and overcast skies. No side roads today, 401 right to the dock of the Bell Center. Bike likes to sit around 120, and even though the scenery's lame, the pavement's like a woman's skin on the 401. You got a lot of time in your head, both good and not so good. Stopped for a Blue Apple and gas, and I spoke to a fellow rider He told me a story of having a rear tire blowout and wiping out on the same piece of 401 that Neil's daughter so tragically lost her life. I went through that section of Cornwall with trepidation, and soon it was past the Quebec sign and back onto the lumpy gravement that they used to call pavement up there. And as usual on the 40, the traffic just stopped, and I clutch dragged for miles before I could take to Kerry down to the venue, past the exit on 40 where I totaled my car 15 years ago on Friday the 13th. Now John guided me around to the buses, and I parked the very dirty bike as close to Neil's bikes as I dared. Into the pyro room for a bit of a schwitz, bite to eat, little wee action on the back of the crew bus, and it was showtime again. I got with Anson in the hen house, and I scored the chicken basting cake for Superior Radio. Now, Anson said the previous guy had boned him by being a dick on stage, goofing with the band and waving to the crowd, so under Security Michael's watchful eye and probably stopwatch, I tore up the stairs on my cue, did my job, and was off stage in 60 seconds. The gag works best that way. Now I sat out front for the start of the second set, as that darn dragon is always a highlight for me. One day I'd hope to use that if the right show comes along and get permission for it, of course. It was loud as hell at front of house, and my feet were vibrating after close to 2,500 kilometers, so after a few songs, backstage into a nice leather chair in David's World. Now the next rock and roll vignette was just before the encore, when the band comes off stage for a water and a wipe, and the area where video sat was right in the vom by the limos. Michael and his team cleared the whole area of punters and crew, and there was dozens of security guards and no locals, and as they eyed me up, it appears I passed the test because I was allowed to stay 5 feet from the band. Now I just watched David look down the corner of my eye, my musical heroes, kind of like what Bob Dylan demands, but I'm doing this on my own. Now this is Montreal and the place is going nuts! So the band runs back out, 3 more songs, escorted by the team to the dressing rooms and out the door. I swear Neil and Dave, his driver, can be back on the interstate before the house lights even warm up. Now I helped a bit in every department on the strike. I packed and I pushed video, pyro, shoved a dozen PA cabinets into a truck, and then Patrick found me and took me upstairs to the big room with swag. Now we didn't have time for the rundown of my ever-growing list of swag, but we were there for the leather jacket with stitched logos. I've been looking at bike jackets for 3 years, and my only leather jacket I use is from a lighting company I fired, so their name's taped up with matte black gaff tape. Now we found the size for me and it feels like butter. Thank you, Patrick, for the family price and a huge list to follow. The building was letting me keep my bike inside and pick it up next morning. So from there I drank and smoked and carried on with the whole crew by the buses until it was time for them to roll. Now I walked up the ramp with my gear, got the doors open, the Vortex rolled on to Philadelphia, while I poured my drunk ass into a cab and went to the Hyatt to Bunk and Joe's room again. June the 18th. There's no place like home. Well, I'm sitting in the front of the building and it's time to wrap this baby up. The next 2 days were spent with my francophone friends. Cheeseburgers on Friday the 13th with Jose. It's whose car I crashed into all those years ago. And then I rode to Highwater down by the Vermont border to stay with Jean-Marie in a dead town. He has an interest in a '69 Cessna, and we flew for a couple hours around the townships that day. And then on to Jean Legault's boat, Chambly. Jean gave me my first moving light gig ever in Montreal, the Big O. Thank you, car shows. They've been very, very good to me. And thank you, Jean. Now I was rewarded with the sunset of the trip and several beers before it was lights out on the boat and time for the farting contest. I fell asleep laughing. The next morning, it was time to head home. All highway riding out of Quebec, and as I approached the same 401 stretch, I looked for a cross. I don't know if there was one, but I watched with a plan to stop and tend to it, should there be one, but there was none. I take this as a good omen because I love Hank Williams Jr. singing Cross on the Highway. And it was rolling in my head as I got off the 401 for hours of clear sailing down Highway 2 in the sun. Almost home when this shit hit the fan again. I had to pull over just after Kingston Road and put on my rain gear. It was bad. And I had to choose between riding 2 miles to my farm and staying on the couch, or 5 miles to my woman's place and the tub. Well, after the storms I'd driven through, this was nothing, and I just carried on down the 401. Got to the house and poured myself into the bathtub. It still felt like I was on the bike. My legs could feel the wind. The wrap-up stats. So, over 3,500 kilometers. We'll round it up to $400 for Shelley. 7 days on the road, 6 nights free accommodation, 600 in non-swag expenses, and $500 swag for me and the bike, now named Cygnus LXQ2. 2 really sore butt cheeks.